Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome to the stage, Chris Hoffmann!
I was smoking weed on the couch one night with my wife when it got real. I asked her, "Do you ever want to have sex with me again?" And she didn't really hesitate that long, and she said, "Not really. I'm not sure if I even like cocks anymore." And usually I like how direct she is, but at this point I thought maybe it'd have been nice if she fought for it a little bit. So, my chin lowers and my big broad chest of a family man kind of collapses, and I let out this long sigh. And I say, "Well, you mind if I cruise around some parties and try to find a girl I can see once a week? Intimacy's kind of important to me." She says, "Okay, as long as I get to meet her." So I go online, I like sign up for Sacred Tantra Club and, Sex Positive and the Tantra, whatever. And I started getting emails, and they're like, "Oh my God, parties." And so I see the Erotic Ball pops up, and I'm like, that's interesting. I'm thinking like a Mardi Gras or something like that, but there's a questionnaire. So I fill out the questionnaire, something about, I don't know, my erotic awakening, and I hit send, and I forget about it. A couple weeks goes by, and I get a response. I'm like accepted to this party. Awesome. Gives me the address. So, the night of the show, I root around, I find my leathers from high school, and I put on my leather jacket, my leather pants, and my t-shirt, and I spike my hair, and I go out the front door. And I drive up to this place, and it's like this big Grange Hall in North Portland. It's just got an address, and there's no sign, there's no balloons. But there's this long line, like sneaking up the aisle, out the alley back behind this place. So I finally get in, and I look at, and it's just like this huge dance floor, and it's like rocking DJ, and all these people in their costumes and their slinky little thing, and I don't even think I saw a bra in the whole place. And I look over in the corner, and there's like the stripper pole. Of course, this is Portland. And then there's this enclosed area, like about the size of 6 phone booths with these oval slots with fabric and a little slot. I later find out it's called the feel-out booth. People go inside and you can feel them. Anyways, so I go downstairs, and I go down there, and it's covered with futons, and there's 3 people having live sex in front of everybody. And I realize this is not a Mardi Gras party. This is a private, curated gig. So with a big grin, I kind of I kind of like this vibe. It reminds me of being in my punk rock band, and I'm like playing bass guitar and looking out over the mosh pit with people stage diving and all this action going on. And I think about the DJs and the after hours clubs and the pimps and the hookers and all this stuff packed into these underground basements. And I realize, God, have I been sleeping in this 20-year marriage? So I go back upstairs, and I look out over the dance floor, and there's this belly dancer girl just, with her little hips and this hip scarf and little bustier thing, and just, oh my God. And I look closer, and not much for tits, and kind of over the top on is that authentic? I don't know. And I look over to this side, and there's this lederhosen-clad woman with these heaving, ice cream scoop boobs just writhing to the music, and I'm like, I'm gonna call her Helga. Anyways, so So I dance over closer to her, and I realize her eyes are closed, and I look down at that vertigo cleavage, and I almost lose my fucking balance. And I wander around behind her, and I look at this junk in the trunk Robert Crumb big fat ass, clad in these leather shorts and these telephone pole legs and the white stockings and the clogs, and I look back up, and there's that little triangle of leather and where you want to stick your finger up there and just see if she's got any underwear on. And then, oh my God. So the blonde ponytail sticking out from the back, I want to just run at her from behind and grab hold and just push her off a cliff and jump on like a dragon in the Avatar movie and just ride her down into the valley and up into the heavens. God, what a woman. Whew. But I couldn't get her attention, so I'm like... So I go over and play on the stripper pole, and then I go into the feel-out booth, and I pull my pants down and let people feel my ass and spank me and stuff. And so I finally find somebody to dance with. So this woman dances with me for a little while, and we're on the dance floor, and she finally leans in, like, "You want to go downstairs and watch people fuck?" like, yeah. So we go downstairs, and we're like holding hands and leaning against a wall. And after the novelty wore off, it's actually kind of sweet. You know, you're just kind of looking at like, you know, like listening to like this harmony of this women in their bliss just kind of create this siren song of like serenity. And it's like, God, this is beautiful. So she eventually said, you know, I got to get going. So I stood up and gave her a hug, and then I kind of sat back down and like steeped in that for a minute. And I eventually looked around, and there's like, everybody's clearing out. So I go back upstairs, and the dance floor is empty, except for 2 people. And I'm looking, and like, oh my God, one of them's Helga. And some guy. So I stand there and check in with my instigator, you know, like, okay, what are my odds? And I say, fuck it. So I just go walking up to her, and I say to the dude, excuse me. And I look at her, and I say, do you want to feel me out in the feel-out booth? And she looks at him like, do you know this guy? And he's like, and she says to me, okay. I'm like, awesome. So I turn around and get about halfway there, and I turn back around, and she's still talking to the guy, and I say, hey! So she looks at me, and she points at me and says, get in there, take your clothes off, and I'll be there in a second. Awesome. So I snake my way into the opening of the feel-out booth, and in the feel-out booth is the belly dancer making out with 2 other chicks. And one of them's got this like purple hair sticking out like this, and the other one's this tall Grace Jones, like gorgeous, like black shiny skin woman. And I'm like, whatever, you know. So I take my clothes off, and I'm standing there waiting for Helga's arm to come through the slot, you know. So her arm comes through the slot, and I'm like, oh. And she's touching me. And then her hand like runs up one side of my body. And then another hand comes through and like, oh God. And so now she's like, and then she like wraps her hands and like runs her fingers down the middle of my spine, like, and then one hand disappears and it comes back in a lower slot and it's like running up the inside of my leg. And then she starts drifting past my cock. And then she like lifts my cock with this butterfly wing little touching thing. And oh my God, I'm like, and my cock gets so hard, I think I'm gonna burst a blood vessel. And she's like doing this little extruded thing that is just so exquisite. And I lean into one of the openings, I say, just come in here. And she says, I can't. She says, just come in here. I don't know if I can or not. Well, then just come over by the door. She's like, okay. So I turn to go over by the door, and I'm ambushed by this belly dancer. He's like, mouth is on me, and his tongue is down my throat. And I realize the razor stubble, and I get a little, this is a dude. And so I got shit to do, just a second, you know? So Helga appears at the door, and I'm locked eyes with her, so okay. And I'm looking at Helga with like, for any sign of like resistance. So I stick 2 of my fingers down between her breast and the front of that leather bustier, and I'm just running them back and forth and looking right at her, and she's like arching her back into me, and it's like, oh God, yeah. So I like pull that fucking thing down, and like the most beautiful breast that I've ever seen in my entire life. And just as I'm about to move towards that thing, there's a mouth on my cock. And I look down, and it's like, shit! And I'm like, how did there get to be a mouth on my cock, and is that okay with me? So I think to myself, well, first of all, I've never had a man's mouth on my cock before. And let me roll this big back. So I looked at him across the dance floor for a while, and maybe he saw me staring at me. And well, there's that time when I danced past him, and I go, hey, hi. You know, and then of course I didn't tell him to fuck off when he kissed me, so I guess this is okay. So he grabs my cock and starts wringing it like a dish rag, and Helga disappears somewhere, and I am like, oh my God, this is not gonna be this girly little blowjob. This is gonna be a man's cock sucking. So my knees go, and I'm like on my back on the floor, and he starts pulling on my cock like he's ripping it out of the ground by the roots. And then it changes this like rattle can wrist action, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm up on this plateau of like, I can't believe this is amazing. But what's so weird is I started thinking about the last time I wanted to have sex with my wife. And it was always kind of sad, because she would hide from me. Like, where are you? I can't feel you. Like, I restored this house for us. I'm playing it by the book. I mean, why do you leave me up here trying to climb through all this barbed wire to try to find you? I look at this belly dancer, his hip scarf and his hair and his dancing and his fucking fully expressed erotic presence right in front of me, modeling for me, like, what does a big, sexy encounter feel like? And his skull descends down. And my hard cock extrudes itself deep down his throat. And the sound of like a lion trying to clear a hairball just comes out of his mouth. All the way down till his teeth are cutting into my pelvis, and he just like lingers there, and I'm like, oh my God, this thing is amazing. And then he pulls his mouth up, and as my cock clears his mouth, strings of mucus hang down from his upper lip, and he looks at me. And I trusted him. And he takes one hand out and he puts it on my shoulder and he drives me down and pins me down against the ground. And I just like let go. I don't care. I let go of it all the way down my spine. And he takes his other hand and he grabs that mucus-covered cock and he starts pounding me. It's like relentless, like a big man with driving in a railroad spike with a sledgehammer. He's just like pounding on me. And there's just this feeling in me of like, what is this? So he's pounding on me, and I just start trying to slow it down with my breathing. And as I'm slowing it down with my breathing, the sound of my voice starts dropping in my throat, and it's just like, oh my God. Oh my God. And as he continues to pound, the involuntary contractions start to like show up in the front of all the way down the front of my body, and I start to tense up, and I start to just resist the feeling, because if I come now, by God, I'm gonna tear a groin muscle. So it finally just takes over me, and I just jackknife forward, and I feel like there's a wrestler on me trying to pin me down for the final count, and I let go of this massive load of cum which lofts through the air over my chest and lands in my left eye. And I am blinded while he gives me 4 more big pumps on my cock, like, oh my fucking God! And he's gone. So I fumble around for a t-shirt, and I like wipe my face off and my bare chest, and I look around, and everybody's gone. And it's quiet. And this peace comes over me. And there's no shame. I actually feel transformed. And I think about all of the energy that I've put into calling women out of their shadow to like meet me in the middle at some place of intimacy so I could feel myself and so I could validate my existence, only to realize that I have never surrendered to somebody else's erotic expression. I have never allowed somebody to call me out of the shadows. I have never had the courage to reflect back to somebody the beauty of their erotic presentation to me. and to wrap that up in my own creative expression and give it back to them so they know that I felt every second of it. So they can feel themselves and they can validate their existence. So as a 60-year-old man, I stand here and I look back that 8 years to that erotic encounter. And I know it was right then that I decided that no matter where I am on my journey to integrate my determined creative engineer with my wild erotic expression, that I am good enough for who I am. And the world is a better place if I stop fighting for my freedom and live as a man who is already free.